and welcome. My name is Mary Lou, and you're listening to the Hera Hotspot podcast, which is all about wellbeing for women, both at home and at work. We will be talking to female entrepreneurs about their business journey and what inspires them, whilst also what living and working holistically looks like to them. To hear and be able to relate to other people's journeys can be a powerful reminder to us all of our own inner strength, resilience, and abilities, whilst also inspiring us to better ourselves. In this series, we'll also be meeting some holistic practitioners and exploring their wonderful practices and how they can help us in our everyday lives. In this week's episode, I'm delighted to introduce Amy Johns, a Solution Focused Hypnotherapist from Kingsbridge. We explore her therapy in depth and how it can help with a variety of issues such as IBS, anxiety, depression, and pain. It was a really fascinating insight into the world of the brain and how we are able to apply ourselves to creating a dynamic and thoughtful life. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Amy as much as I did. If you sat next to someone at a dinner party and they asked what you did, what would you tell them?
I would say that I am a solution-focused hypnotherapist, and the long version of that would be I work with people to help them achieve what their goal will be. So we talk about ultimate happiness and what that might be for them, and it's about helping them achieve that end goal. I often work with people who are dealing with general anxiety or help them coping with symptoms of depression. But it isn't just about the general depression or anxiety. It can be where people are just stuck in a certain part of their life and they just need somebody to help them figure out how to move that forward. So what I do as a hypnotherapist isn't magic. It is about actually helping them figure it out for themselves and helping them realize that they are the expert in their own lives. So I often call myself like a facilitator in some respects. I facilitate and ask them very solution focused questions to help them figure out what they want for their future and how they can achieve it. I use a lot of neuroscience in what I do, so a lot of the sort of most up-to-date research in terms of how the brain works, and we talk about how the brain works going back to caveman days and relating back to that part of the brain where we have the emotional part of the brain, I suppose, and we use that knowledge to understand how we cope and how we deal with situations, and then work with that to look at how we can deal with things differently going forward.
So when I meet people, they never quite know what I do and I have to explain it, but I suppose you're quite lucky in a way that hypnotherapy is very open and very accepted and used across healthcare. If there are any barriers that people have, what do they tend to be? What are their concerns about hypnotherapy?
Well, I think actually still hypnotherapy is not, it is getting more common and more well known, but it's still not recommended by the NHS. The only thing the NHS recommend hypnotherapy for is IBS, because obviously the gut is very much related to the brain. So we produce I think 95% of our serotonin comes from the gut, and we also produce serotonin in our brain, and that's our happy chemical. So if we suffer from IBS, we can really suffer from stress as well, and that stress can exacerbate the IBS. So that's why the NHS will recommend hypnotherapy for IBS, but that's the only one. So it's still, it's still very much, I would say, people, because it's not a recommended like CBT, people are unsure about it. They don't know too much about it. So I think, and I suppose the usual stage hypnotherapy or hypnotherapy shows where people are on there making people like chickens.
Yeah.
we come up against that. It's just a stage show kind of thing. So you have that lack of knowledge about how it works, I suppose, and the whole kind of potentially mind control part of it. But it's not like that at all. If I was to go to a hypnosis show, should I say, not hypnotherapy, a hypnosis show, the hypnosis guy, he probably wouldn't choose me because I know too much about it, so I'm not as susceptible to getting up and acting like a chicken. When I work with my clients, it's about getting them to also understand that trance is very nice, it's very relaxing, and actually are in complete control at all times. If they wanted to come out of the trance at any time, they can. So my sessions are very much split into two parts. The first part is talking, where we are very solution focused. We might talk about how the brain works, how we might have dealt with something, and how we can then possibly deal with that in the future, and understanding the brain. So not just neuroscience, but using CBT techniques, NLP, and also just mindfulness as well, having that awareness about how we think.
Do people get stuck in that? Because I use a lot of goal setting in what I do, and I know sometimes personally you're so stuck in where you are now that sometimes it's quite hard to imagine where you want to be. And I have to help my clients make that leap. Going, actually, what would it look like if you didn't have this problem?
Yes. Yes. So I think it was in the 1970s or early 1980s. There was Steve DeShazer and Kim DeBerg. I should need to remember his name, but they basically came up with the solution focused brief therapy. So, which is what I use within my talking part to a certain extent. I use that theory. So basically, when they first started developing the solution focused brief therapy, they were working with a client who the whole life was complete mess. Children, husband, whatever, job and everything. And she just couldn't see a way forward. She couldn't see it. So they asked the question, if a miracle happened, what would be the first thing you noticed that was different? And by giving her then time to think about it, she then started saying, well, my kids wouldn't be doing this, and my husband, and blah, blah, blah. And she started to visualize a different future.
Yeah. So powerful.
It is. And that is the big key. So the massive bit about the neuroscience I use is that the brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So we talk about that limbic system part of the brain, and what we tell it believes is true. And it's about then kind of learning to think about things in a different way, to start practicing that skill of positive thinking, because the more we have that skill, the more we'll be working in our left prefrontal cortex, the positive part of our brain. So the more positively we'll be thinking about things, so the more we'll cope with things. So anyways, they got her thinking about best hopes for the future. And from that, they were then able to kind of start saying, well, what small change would you notice tomorrow if you were moving towards that ultimate goal? What would you be doing differently? So it's bringing it back. The brain can't deal with huge changes, especially when we're working in that emotional part of the brain. If we're really stuck in a place, we will probably be working in that part of the brain more than anything, because actually the brain is like a muscle. So the more we use that limbic system and our amygdala, the more we're working in our amygdala, the fight, flight and freeze part of the brain, the bigger it gets. So the more tendency we have to work in that part of the brain. So we have to practice positive thinking. So we bring our left prefrontal cortex back, make that muscle the bigger, and the amygdala will shrink back. So it's like doing physical exercise on our body muscles as well. It's the same thing we have to do with our brains. So it's moving people, and the more we work with people and like you said, you know, you have to help them, but it's getting them to have confidence in their own ability to do it, and know that they're an expert in what they want. But the more we work with people over a number of weeks, the easier it gets, because the brain likes repetition as well. So it begins to understand what's expected of it. So they'll be thinking subconsciously in the week, oh, I've got to go and see Amy. She's going to be asking me these questions. So what do I want? And without even realizing it, they'll be starting to think that way naturally. And the trance part, ultimately, I give a track to my clients, and I ask them to do it at bedtime every night. So it's a lovely deep relaxation trance track. It's about 30 minutes. And trance, so we know, as everybody will probably have heard in the news and all over the social media and the internet, that sleep is key for our healthy mental behaviors. So that's how we reduce our stress down, by getting decent sleep. It empties out our stress bucket, and it really helps us work in our left prefrontal cortex. So by getting decent sleep, we really do help ourselves. But when we're in a place where we're not feeling so great, often our sleep is impacted. So trance, 30 minutes of trance is equivalent to 4 hours worth of sleep. So it's a really powerful tool. So I give my clients that to do at bedtime, or as close to bedtime as they can, fitting in with their routine, because it supercharges their REM sleep and their sleep. But then when I'm in the session with them, the language patterns and the things that I use within the trance are fairly generic, because everybody will hear things, the key messages that are relevant to them. So it's not about what I think they need, it's about what they will hear in them. But what we're doing is getting them into a really, really nice, relaxed, deep state of relaxation. And when we're in that state, there's a part of the brain called the critical faculty, which is like our security guard. So I sort of say to my clients, when we finish, if I was to say I'm going out into my back garden and going off into space, your immediate reaction would be to kind of smirk and say, yeah, whatever. It's not true, because I haven't got a rocket, and it just doesn't happen. And the reason you smirk and dismiss it is that critical faculty is filtering out information. But sometimes that critical faculty can get it wrong. So what we need to do is lower it down. And the best way to do that is through deep relaxation. And then you then have the ability to start playing around with the building blocks of your behaviors within your brain, to start embedding new behaviors and new changes.
So when does that kick in? Because it must be out of childhood. There's a point where your critical faculty gets shaped by society's reasoning or what you hear, surely? Or am I wrong?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think it's past behaviors, experiences, and things like that build our own inner voice and our own inner thoughts. Because again, you're absolutely right. It's not people, it's not situations, it's not events that cause the anxiety in our life, or the stress, or whatever, us to not achieve something in our life. It's our own thinking.
Yeah.
Because I know you've got children that have gone off to university, am I right?
Yeah.
Or have gone away. And when they go, that's a massive change. When they were living at home, I'm sure you were doing their washing. You were cooking for them. You were doing everything for them.
Yeah.
School, when they were at school, it's a different sense of learning. They're more spoon-fed. But when they go away to university, they're making new friends. They're having to pay bills. They're having to do their own washing, their own cooking, their own shopping. They're having to, and then they're having to learn in a very different way. So we know that it's not the events, the situation, or the people, or that change in our life that causes the anxiety, but more our thinking, because otherwise all university students would be having panic attacks, and they're not.
But having said that, Amy, I do have a friend who works in university, and she deals with the mental wellbeing students, and she is overrun by how many students who are not coping, and who have their mental wellbeing is not safe, and it's getting worse, she says.
And I think it's interesting. Is it I often wonder, is it because we, rightly so, are more aware of mental health? People are more talking about it now.
They don't seem capable. They don't seem to have the tools to cope with everything. It's a huge life change.
Yes.
But as parents, we're not setting them up. But they are not able to cope with all that expectations.
That's something that I'm quite keen on. I think, you know, and there's a lot of people out there already doing it, but actually getting into primary schools and starting to talk to children about how the brain works, because the biggest powerful thing when I sit there in my initial consultation and I talk to clients about how the brain works, and I tell them about there's obviously huge amounts of different parts of the brain, and I'm not a doctor, but the bits I talk about, the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, so your intellectual part of the brain, the conscious part of the brain that we use to interact as we are now, and then the limbic, the original primitive part of the brain that we had when we were cavemen, that still works as if we were cavemen because it hasn't had a Microsoft 10 upgrade on it, but that's the emotional part of the brain. Those are the two bits. So when we start to understand how those two parts work and what happens when we're working in those two parts, we can then actually start to recognize and notice which part of the brains we're working in. And when we can do that, we can start to take control, because it is our brain. It's one brain, two minds, but it's all ours. So I think, going back to children, if we can start to, and they understand it, they're not stupid, if we can start to educate them into the mental health and the way the brain works and how they can cope with different situations, whether that's social interactions with children or changes in circumstances, moving up to senior school, whatever it might be, exams, things like that. What we'll be doing is teaching them skills that they can then use at any point in their life.
Yeah, so powerful and so necessary.
Because I think a lot of the adults I work with don't know this stuff.
No. And it makes me sad, actually, that the children don't get that as a matter of course. And when I touched on this with Emma Lane Harvey about the skill set that children have and how empowering it is to understand, actually, I'm in control of a lot of things. But to know you're in control of your mind and how you respond, and whether you're freaked out or upset or feeling worthless or feeling anxious, it's at your fingertips, really, if you have the toolbox to know how to approach it differently. So valuable.
Yeah. And I mean, children, I work with children, individual children, differently to adults, because children's brains are not as developed like adults. They're still going through that developmental stages. So they respond to trance and things very differently to an adult. But actually, children do respond to and they're interested. They are interested in it.
Sure.
And I use, obviously, we talked a little bit earlier on about the solution focused questions and guiding them to help them find. And I talk about time machines with children. You know, if you're able to get into my time machine and go forward, what would be different? What would you notice about yourself? And it is about building that confidence. And finding their voice, I think. Letting them have a voice. And I mean, I'm not perfect. I've got 2 children myself. I'm an expert in how the brain works, but I don't always use the right language with my children in terms of that positive, because we want to protect them. We want to wrap them up and make everything better, because that's a mother's instinct. But actually, sometimes it's about saying, this is life. And giving them the chance to figure out how they want to deal with it themselves.
I mean, I've had issue with my eldest, who's now about to turn 22. So, and again, I am all for supporting mental health, and I am utterly aware that it is an issue, and I'm not denigrating in any way. But at times, she would ring me from uni and say, "I'm having a depressive episode," and I'd go, "I'm really sorry you're doing that, but actually, I think you're just having a shitty day." You don't necessarily need to label it, because you then get stuck in that. And I think it's disempowering for them or for her to say that. Going, actually, if you're looking at the issue, I've got this, and well, okay, isn't that amazing? You're seeing it as a burden or as an overwhelm. But actually, isn't that exciting that you've got an interview or a this or that? You know, And let's look at one at a time, which is time sensitive, which you put on the shelf for 2 weeks. And this is again about managing her overwhelm.
Yeah.
Let's see it for what it is, rather than calling it a depressive episode and then labeling yourself being, well, I'm depressed. You're not. You're just having to juggle life, and that's hard.
And it is. And I think this is the fine balance, isn't it? I mean, I had my own sort of breakdown a few years ago, and lots of different things going on in my life, so I'm quite keen. The one thing I am quite keen is to actually try and break down that stigma of mental health. But you're up against a battle in some respects, because when that person is in that place, the limbic system is telling them all sorts of rubbish that says you're weak, you've got no strength, you're not worthy, and things like that. So it encourages people not to speak up. So actually having that strength to speak up and hold your hands up when you're in that position is really tough. So you've got that side of it. But then I also think, yes, you're absolutely right. Again, when you start talking to children, you know, they haven't got the emotional intelligence that we've got. So they don't know anything about anxiety, really, like we've just talked about, or you know, not, or being worried or things like that. So it's only when parents start to actually put a label on it that they will then go, oh, I've got a problem. So you're absolutely right in terms of, we don't want to go too far into kind of going, oh, this is what it is, because yes, life is up and down. And it's about using those skills to cope with those ups and downs, and knowing that you'll come up again. It's only when you keep going down that it's a problem. You know, so it is about recognizing, and understanding what you need to do as a person to help yourself come back up again.
And that's the empowering bit, and that is to have the tools and have the understanding, and not go, oh my God, I'm just going down a slide, so hence I must keep going. Well, actually, no, it is. Life is an up and a down, and you know, the peaks and the troughs, and knowing that actually you will come up, but let's give you the tools to do it, or change your mindset, or change your language, or give you the support you need.
So I think, I mean, I grew up with an anxiety condition called trichotillomania, which was where I pulled all my hair out. So I had that for many years, and I discovered hypnotherapy, and that's what helped me. So that's why, surprisingly, I got into hypnotherapy, because I just loved it. It made sense, and I love all about this talk. I can be a right brain bore. So it really just hit home with me, and it changed how I think and how I live. And then I had cancer, and I worked a very busy job in my old job, and life just got too much, and I ended up on the floor. So I did a complete change of career and became a hypnotherapist at that time. But even though I know the answers, I know the solutions, I know what I should be doing, it doesn't mean that I'm not human. And I've still got this part of the brain that can mean that when my stress levels go up too much, if I've been really busy or not very well, or you know, things have been happening in my life, my stress levels will go up. But what's the difference now is that I recognize what's going on. I recognize the signs within my body, and I'm very aware of it, how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, how I'm reacting to the children. And at that point I go, right, I now need to put my skills into place. I need to do this, I need to do that, whatever it might be. And I take control of it, and I action eliminates anxiety at the end of the day. So it's about taking control.
And is that training? Because sometimes I think, well, I can do it if I'm conscious, if I'm really present all the time, which we're not. We're just reacting all the time, or coping all the time. So do you find that easier because of your training, or just because you are much more aware and conscious?
I think having the hypnotherapy for myself obviously taught me a lot. I would say that I'm then talking about it with my clients on a daily basis. So I think there is that constant talking. But what I would say is, when I talk to clients, it becomes a habit. You're forming a new habit. So it's about practice, you know, whatever kind of habit it is. So when I first ended up basically mentally and physically on the floor, I went on sabbatical, and I was like, right, okay, my first step is I'm going to start running. I've got to get physically fit. So just for myself, I'm going to go out running. And it was painful. I hadn't really done any exercise for a good couple of years. And it hurt to go out running, basically. But I made myself go because it was for me. And I now am, 5 years on? I'm now a consistent runner. I run. And I know when I haven't been running, because it's one of my signs. I know that going out for a run really keeps me in a great place from mind perspective, as well as sort of fit. But actually, if I haven't run for a week, 10 days, I feel it physically and mentally. But it took practice to get that into be a habit. And it's exactly the same with positive thinking and awareness and mindfulness and all of those skills of looking at what, that thought management, as I call it.
It is, and for me, I just call it ego. It's separated, that voice that goes, oh shit, it's going to go all wrong, or you're no good at this. That, I don't know what you would call it. For me, that's what I call ego. It's like, well, if you listen to that, it's only going to go in one direction. And it's happened for me, put a positive spin on, going, I've been through worse, or I've gained strength from this, or I'm wiser because of this, and not indulging. And maybe indulging is the wrong word, because it sounds like you want to do it, but not being held captive to it, not having that being a stronger voice.
So I talk about acceptance, accepting that we have this part of this brain that is encouraged to think negatively because it's there to save our lives. That is what the amygdala, the fight, flight and freeze part of the brain, is there to save our lives. We needed it, and we still do. We need to know when not to step out into a road, but it can get it wrong, and it's about recognizing that it's getting it wrong.
So can I take you sideways on this to a personal issue, which I've not done before? I was telling you earlier, my husband has chronic pain. And over the years, he's had it for 10 years, so he's on loads of drugs, and there are various sort of physical or medical things we've tried which haven't worked. And I have felt very strongly over the years, and he's slightly sort of buying into it now, that the brain has the ultimate power over his pain. And I was listening to a chap called, escaping now, he's an Australian chap, come to me in a minute, he's got a very unusual name. And he was talking about the amygdala. And he was saying, giving a story that he was saying the amygdala, again, please prove me wrong on this, if need be, the amygdala hardwires by the age of about 6. And anything it learns prior to that goes into your hard drive. And he was talking about pain, how he was walking through the bush in Australia, and he thought a leaf had brushed his leg. And actually it turned out to be a lethal snake bite, which almost killed him.
Right.
So he recovered from that, obviously. And next time he was walking through the bush, and literally a leaf brushed his leg. It wasn't a snake. The brain went, hang on, last time that happened, you almost died. So my brain goes, red flashing lights, on warning, and he sort of collapsed in pain, although it was literally a leaf. Yeah. So I'd had a thought about my husband, who had 2 very painful experiences as a child. He lived abroad, lived in Malaysia, and he stood on a drain cover, and his feet basically melted to the drain cover, and they had to peel his feet off. So horrendous, took all the skin off. Yeah. Massively painful. And another occasion where he fell into, I think it was a green ant nest, and it was the ants that leave their heads in and leave loads of toxins in. So they had to pull 100 ant heads out of his body. So he'd had these 2 massively painful experiences. And I'm thinking, is there a link between what the amygdala has learned from that to then he has this spinal injury? And from what I understand, the body, there is pain, doesn't exist. And what happens is the nerves send a message to the brain, and it's how the brain then interprets it, like the leaf and the snake, like Lorimer Moseley, I think his name is, how the brain goes, oh, hang on, this is either a leaf or it's lethal, and it's a snake bite. So does that fit in with your teachings?
Yeah, it does. So what we've got is there's 3 parts to the limbic system. The most influential bit is the amygdala, as we talked about, which is the fight, flight and freeze part of the brain. You've got your hypothalamus, which in simple terms, regulates all the chemicals to the body and the brain. So this is the bit that kind of sends messages to release hormones, sort of cortisol, adrenaline, serotonin, dopamine, things like that. And then you've got the hippocampus, which is your memory. It's the bit that holds all of your behaviors and your memories, and sometimes they're inappropriate memories and behaviors. So you talk about, you were just talking about that pain doesn't exist. And when it comes to chronic pain, potentially what's happened, what we say, so if you break your arm, you've got acute pain, and that is pain because you've broken your arm. But the pain, as it heals, it goes, and the message is that sensation, pain, back to the brain from the arm.
That's the body going, don't move, you're in pain, or make it worse.
Yeah, it's making it, But chronic pain, we talk about, or I talk about having a pain, a gate, and the gate's been left open. So there's no pain there to a certain extent. It's just that this message keeps on going round and round in circles. I think that's probably the easiest and simplest way. It's probably a lot more complicated than that, but that's the easiest and simplest way to explain it. So it will go to that point, and then it will send a message back. So with hypnotherapy, it's not always possible to get rid of that pain, although it can make it. It can ease it. It depends on the person's situation. So we would know whether we can learn, if we're looking to reduce the pain, or whether we're looking to actually just cope with the symptoms, if that makes sense, depending on an individual situation.
But then after 10 years, my husband's mindset is so entrenched. Yes. Understandably, and I don't mean that I'm a hugely admirer of his, that he's copes every day and gets up and actually manages to go to work. That the longer it goes on, the harder it must be to break that. So I've seen it on the X-rays. I've seen where the damage is. You can't cure it. It exists, and he just thinks a certain way.
So he's got. He will have this message that's going into, if what we did yesterday ensured our survival, we will be encouraged to do it again. So he's got this thought, behavior, memory in his hippocampus, and he will be sent there. That's where it's what's familiar. This is what's always happened. So if we talk about panic attacks, again, in very simple form, it becomes a panic attack. You might be in Sainsbury's or any other supermarket, and it will. You'll start to panic, and the brain is looking for the danger. Where's the danger? Where's the danger? Where's the danger? And it can't always find the danger, and you end up with this panic attack, panic building and building and building. You end up with a panic attack. The next time you go into Sainsbury's, you're going into the hippocampus and said, "Oh, Sainsbury's was dangerous. Sainsbury's was dangerous." So you're nervous already. About going there, because it could happen again. It could happen again. Be careful. Do you really want to go to Sainsbury's? It could happen again. And what happens is that potentially it becomes more about your thinking than actually Sainsbury's. We know logically, rationally, Sainsbury's is not dangerous. It's not going to hurt you. But we end up in that thinking where we're going into the hippocampus. I had a panic attack last time, so it's going to happen again. So it's about recognizing, and it's sort of the same with IBS. People going out on journeys, they may be away from the comfort of their home. So it's going to happen, but actually we're already pumping cortisol into our body, because it happened last time and I got caught out. I had to go to the toilet. We're already pumping cortisol into our body, and we know that when it comes to that, when we start to get stressed, what the body is doing is saying, I need to shut down all unneeded functions for survival, one of them being the gut. And therefore that's why we can end up feeling sick. When we get stressed, our stomach can churn and things like that. And that's because it's not needed for us to run away from those wild animals of caveman days. So it becomes an embedded memory. It doesn't mean you can't learn and you can't reverse it. And that's when we talk about the serotonin and So I then I talk to my clients about the production of serotonin, is that natural high. Yeah, again, we talk about caveman days. I relate a lot back to caveman days because that's how we were. And it's only society. And as I said, the limbic system hasn't had an upgrade. It is still as it was. We've just clumped on these new bits onto our brain, our limbic system, left prefrontal cortex, the left cortex part of the brain. That's our intellectual. And as we've got more advanced, that's the bit that's made us more advanced. So the limbic system is still very primitive. And it's about, so we need to think about how that part of the brain responds. So we talk about it initially in the negative in terms of anxiety, anger, and depression, and those three primitive responses to keep us alive. But then we also have to look at how we coped with those situations. It wasn't an easy lifestyle to live.
No.
You know, we weren't always, I didn't always have food. We lived as a tribe because for our survival. So we talk about the fact that we had to be physically active in a positive way. We have to interact in a positive way, and we have to think in a positive way. Because when we do those three things, we're producing this wonderful flow of serotonin and other lovely neurotransmitters in the brain that act as a catalyst for healthy behaviour.
So when I talk to my husband about so getting up in the morning, he wakes up at sort of 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. The first 2 hours, in his words, like being hit by a train, and he can't function. So sometimes I go to bed going, and I know he often says, "Oh, well, the mornings are awful, and I hate going to sleep because I dread waking up." I'm a Libra, and so I split everything. But half of me absolutely is steeped in empathy and sadness and worry for him, and then the other half goes, don't say that, don't have that expectation that we're going to wake up in pain. And I feel really mean saying it, because this other half of me goes, that's awful, and I see it and I witness it. But the other half goes, but the power of your thoughts and the power of your expectation and the power of your brain is so huge. But he's going, oh no, I don't think I'm going to wake up in pain. I suppose he just says, I just know I am, and it hurts. And it's getting him out of that.
And I suppose it becomes like acceptance. It's the same with people that have got IBS. You know, actually accepting that there's an element of IBS and it could happen reduces the stress down and the pressure down. So therefore, they won't have the same reaction.
And I totally hear that, and that's wonderful if someone is calm and goes, it's okay, let's just cope, and I'm accepting. And then the energetic side of me goes, but energetically, if you just go, well, this is what I've got, you're sitting in that, and there's no expectation of it ever shifting and being something else. So
it's not about, so that's it. So it's not about, there's an element of accepting, but then it's living your life anyway. Does that make sense? So that's where the 3 Ps, what I call the 3 Ps, positive activity, positive interaction, positive thinking, come into place. That's where we need to get our focus on. Because when we do that, so I talk about, with my clients, I talk about a guy who actually had, I don't often use like for like with clients when I talk about stories and things like that. But actually this one's quite relevant. So pain, he had chronic pain. And what we discovered was that when he was at home on his own, he used to have to take the tablets, and it was miserable, and he felt, the pain was there. But then there was a time where his mate said, right, come on, I'm going to take you out. And he went out for the day, and he had a great time with his mate, and they went all over the place, and he was fine. And then it wasn't until he got back and he was on his own that he then noticed the pain again. So it's not to take away from the pain and say, you know, come on, it's all in your head, but it's about actually not letting it rule. Does that make sense?
Well, totally.
It's not letting. It's about actually saying,
because he will go to work and he has a physical job, and he says he'll work sometimes 12-hour days, and actually being active and distraction is the best thing because he doesn't feel the pain. The problem is he does it for longer and longer and longer to get away from the pain, and when he comes home it hits him like a train because he's physically done too much. But combined to that, he's also got ADHD, which he loves. He's so excited about the fact he has ADHD.
Right, okay.
His brain doesn't sit in it long enough. So his brain's pinging all the time, but it's only when he stops, it's like, oh, jeepers, this is when the train hits. This is when the pain comes back.
Yeah.
So I totally relate to that.
Yeah. And it's about him finding that balance, I suppose, and having but knowing what's right for him. So yeah, I don't, without going into too much talk about your husband too much, but it is about that. So with clients, I am getting them to think about those 3 Ps. So, but we start really with, so what would be different? So the question would be, so if you were coping, yes, you've got a physical job, but if you were to wake up tomorrow and you were coping with that pain when you got home from work in a better, in the way that he wants to, how would you know that you were? What small thing would you have noticed that would suggest to you that you are coping with it? What would you be doing differently? Does that make sense? So it's that kind of, have a think, that future hope of how would you know? So even if you were feeling the pain, if you were coping with it, what would you be doing? Anyway, and it could be that he was sitting there and he was having a laugh with you. It could be that he was, I don't know, doing some mind calm stuff or whatever makes him happy. But it would be those 3 Ps. So the positive activity, which doesn't have to be exercise, because a lot of my clients, they come to me and they don't like exercise. They're not in the right place for it. So we're talking about playing music or fiddling with cars or baking or sewing or reading or listening to music, whatever it might be, as long as it makes them happy and there's a positive activity. Sometimes it's even getting rid of the actions that are for work that may be hanging over your head that you just keep putting to one side, but actually just ticking one of those off, that can make you feel better. Positive interaction, being with your friends and family. A lot of the time people, when they're not in a good place, they don't want to be with people. But actually, if you can get through that feeling and just say, oh, I'm not feeling great, but I'm here, your loved ones will expect it, and friends will accept that. And actually, after a while, you probably find that you still have that great night. How many nights have you gone, oh, I'm too tired to go out? And then you go out and you have a good night. And it's that positive interaction. We're better as a tribe than we are as an individual. But it's also about staying true to your boundaries and making sure you've got a voice. So going back to what we were talking about with children. And then that positive thinking, thoughts come and go. It's that negative, we might have negative thoughts, but we also have positive thoughts. It's not getting hooked into that negative thought so it takes over the whole brain. It's about just accepting that it's there and it will go. Focus on something that does make you happy. So we talk a lot about positive interaction and positive action because they're more tangible. And once you've kind of started to make those small changes in someone's life, one small thing, whether it's putting lipstick on before you go out in the morning to give you a little bit more confidence, you start to feel proud of yourself, and the positive thinking naturally comes, is what I find.
I think my one of the biggest learnings from my husband is he's a huge advocate for hidden illness, whether that be MS or depression or pain or fibromyalgia or anything like that. Is putting, as you say, putting lipstick on and going out. It's the biggest barrier is meeting other people's expectations. And he was learning that people will say, oh, how are you? And that can apply to anyone with a hidden illness. And more often not, you want to go, oh, I'm fine, because you want to make it okay for them, because you don't want to necessarily have to deal with them going, oh, is it really bad? Or, oh, well, let's carry on. And I think as a society, it's really valuable for us. Again, I know it's very PC now, but genuinely for us to be accepting about whether you have got IBS or that your friend has to, be somewhere where she knows there's a toilet, or someone who is anxious in a large social setting, is to accommodate all of that and be okay with them not being okay, not having to make them feel better, and just sitting in that space with them and going, actually, you did it. You went out for a night out, or, you managed to do one drink and everything, and not having to, waiting for someone with a hidden illness to make you feel better. I think is quite common subconsciously, because you feel uncomfortable. You don't know what to do with a depression or an illness.
But again, do you not think that's because we're a tribe? And if we go back to caveman days, we really communicated through those emotions. So crying, if you felt guilty, it's because you knew you'd done something wrong. Crying showed everybody else that you were feeling down. But actually, we also have in the brain, we have these mirror neurons, which means that I suppose the easiest way is that's where our empathy comes from. So it's how children learn to react to something. So in the jungles, if they came across a wild animal, they wouldn't know it was dangerous, but the mother's reaction, fearful, her body language would change, whatever else, or she would also probably tell the child to run. But we have these mirror neurons in the brain that teach us the empathy and pick up what we're doing. So we feed off each other. Again, you could say that two people in an office, one-to-one manager and member of staff, they go in, and if somebody's already working in their amygdala, then very likely then the other person will naturally work in their amygdala as well. And it's only when one person changes their approach that actually the other person will probably change their approach, because of these mirror neurons in the brain. So I think we have this natural empathy as a tribe, as a group of people, that when we care about somebody, we want to make them feel better as well, because that would ensure our own survival. They would survive, we survive, kind of thing. So I think it's not about beating ourselves up because we've got that natural want to make people feel better. But I do agree with you. I think it's learning that actually, again, the person is the expert in themselves, and you need to respect that. And it's difficult if you're living with somebody with depression. You just want to make them feel better, but it's not. But
that's about you, not about them.
Yeah, and that's right, exactly. And it's about learning to cope again. Learning to cope with that person, so you don't take it all on your own shoulders as well. But you are right in terms of, I think it's good to say, actually, I'm not feeling great today, with the people you trust. It doesn't have to be to everybody, but the people we trust. I'm not feeling great today. And then it's about having the confidence to say, you don't need to do anything else, but just be aware that I may not be myself. But that you might want them to do something differently. So it's whatever you want them to do. It's having the confidence to put those boundaries in place.
And it is having a voice as someone who suffers with whatever physical or mental ailment, to actually go, actually, I'm okay where I am. I'm okay, and you have to accept that. Whether you accept it or not is up to you. But that, when you're already feeling under par, to then feel okay, it's a big step. And I think it's a huge triumph for anyone to be able to own that and sit in that space and go, actually, I'm okay with not being well today or being on the sofa all day. I'm not going to feel guilty. I'm not going to do this. And this is the fact that I'm out of bed and I'm dressed is huge. In my world, that's 20 steps. In yours, it's step one. But it's relative, isn't it?
And I think when I started really going, so I talked about I had trichotillomania, went through hypnotherapy, changed everything. But then our lives when the children were babies really was very, very busy. I worked in sales in financial services. My husband works in financial services, but he used to go away 4 days a week, and I was going to London, Scotland, wherever throughout the week, and then coming home to the children. So for 4 years, I was basically in the week a single mum with a full-time job that travelled as well. And my mum very early on said, "Oh, if you keep this up, you're going to end up on the floor." I was then diagnosed with cervical cancer, so I had to have a hysterectomy and had to go through all of that. And after that, I literally came back to work. I then fell over and broke my ankle, so I couldn't drive again for another 8 weeks. And I actually started to go into get low. I was probably depressed. So I ended up on long-term sick again for a bit because I just wasn't mentally fit. And then towards the end of the year, November, I mean, in my job as well, I've always that personality I've got is that I strive to be the best. Yeah. And I'm lovely to everybody else, but I can always have quite high expectations of myself. compared to, I wouldn't expect it of anybody else, but me, no, I have to deliver. So I always had that attitude. So I was trying to do so much and recover from cancer and everything else. And my manager came to me and said, "Oh, you've got gaps." I was a line manager, and she said, "You've got gaps in your management." And I had been a line manager for 15 years, and I knew it. I recognised that I wasn't doing my job as well as I used to do it. And basically that was it. I just went, I can't do this anymore, and chose to take a sabbatical. And because I knew if I went on long-term sick, the way my brain worked, I would be always thinking, I need to be back at work.
Yeah.
So I chose a sabbatical for myself, because I knew then I've got 6 months to do what I want to do. And I basically, like you were saying, I started off, and I spoke to the doctors. I said I didn't want to go on to antidepressants. That was my choice. And she said, well, if you're not moving off the sofa in a month, come back to me, because it will help you move, and help you, it helps with the whole serotonin production. And but I didn't. Initially, I just sat on the sofa. I had a guilty secret of watching that new Hawaii 5-0. It was my guilty pleasure, which everybody just takes the mickey out of. But I just sat there. I watched it on Sky One, and I was quite happy, just resting.
Yeah.
And it felt strange for me. I felt guilty initially because I felt like I should be doing something, but I let myself do it. And then I started to go out running a couple of times a week. And then after I'd been doing that for a month, I then joined the local running club that was part of my boys' school. So I started meeting people and things like that. And I was always in the background. I was always like, I need to make a decision about what I'm doing with my career, because I've always worked. I've always got to do it, got to do it. And I'd gone back to see my own hypnotherapist at that time as well. And he was just like, if you just take the pressure off and don't worry about it, the answer will come. The more pressure you put on, the more you're working in your limbic system, so the less you know what you want. So by just taking the pressure off, I would work in my intellectual part of the brain, that left prefrontal cortex, which would be able to figure out what I want. And it did. I just went hypnotherapy, and I never went back. So I think about allowing yourself and not feeling guilty is a big thing in terms of looking after yourself.
I find that so interesting. I find that really, I would term it so differently in my language, both in my faith and in my training, but it's the same. It's the same result, however you word it, is not pushing it. And for me, it's sitting and trusting and faith and allowing it to come, rather than, because I'm very analytical and I will always try and find a reasoned way to get through something. But that never, unless it's literally a fun thing at work, like, okay, I've got to do this and this, it doesn't serve me living, being, feeling. It's about giving up that analytical ego, whatever it is, control, to go, okay, what's going to come? What do I feel? Again, heart, gut. So stop thinking with this and actually connect with the rest of my body. So interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I think there are lots of us out there that do, we all have our different ways. And it's, and this is why I think there is space for all of us to help people, because actually you will connect with the people that it resonates with. So it doesn't matter, what am I trying to say here? It doesn't matter whether, you and I do help people in similar ways, but do it very differently. But actually, if it's right for that person, it's right for that person, which is why when I first meet my clients, I always give them a free initial consultation, because actually I want them to understand what the process is and make sure I'm the right person for them. Because if I'm not, then actually it's not going to be it's not going to be powerful. They're not going to progress like they would still progress, but not probably as powerfully as they would if the rapport was there. So, I mean, I've had clients, sorry.
I have to say, in one of the podcasts I was listening to, that she calls it the two yes system. It's about as much as you taking on board people that you know you can help, genuinely help and connect with, as them going, actually, yes, I can connect with this, I want to do that, because it's really valuable.
Absolutely. I think it is having that therapeutic rapport is key,
because there's no point helping someone you know is not going to succeed, because one, it doesn't help them, but it doesn't give you as a professional great feedback. So you've both got to ascend in the same way.
So I work quite successfully with adults on Zoom, but I do work with children, but on Zoom I'm very clear with the parents that actually, because they're children, they don't have the same attention span. And it's a very different format to being in a room with a child, where you can actually interact more, physically play, pick things up and things like that. So we'll say we'll give it a go, but I'll be very clear up front within the first couple of sessions if I think if Zoom's not right for them. And then I will always look to find them a solution focused hypnotherapist within their area if it's not right. And I think we have a responsibility as therapists to do that, to make sure that we are giving our clients the right support that they need. So I think I love my job, and much better than financial services.
What, moving forward in 5 years' time, I know it's a horrible interview question, but how do you want it to look then for you? Do you have any plans of how you want to be treating people, or professionally, what that looks like for you?
My children will be older, so I'll have more time for myself. So currently what I do is kind of based around work-life balance. It's perfect for the family. When I lived in Bristol, I used to also do workshops. So I used to go into big businesses and corporations and deliver either 3-hour workshops or lunch and learns or whatever it might be that was relevant for them, teaching people how the brain works and how they can do. So they might not need to come and see me on a one-to-one, but again, it was teaching people what they can do for themselves. And I loved that, actually. And because I worked within those kind of businesses for 20 odd years, I get how they work. So I wouldn't mind building that up again. Since I've moved to Devon from Bristol, I haven't done that part. Just sort of been settling into the area, looking after the children. So I've kind of had time off. So and just been doing one-to-one clients. So I would like to see that part, getting out into companies again and doing that. Because surprisingly, I'm a bit of a performer. I did not know that about myself until I started doing these workshops. But I don't mind getting up in front of them. And doing that kind of training. So that part, and I would like to see helping more people, sort of that one-to-one. It's just, I just want to help people. I know that sounds really ridiculous. I get it. I've been saying it to my husband for the last couple of years, and all my frustrations, all I want to do is help. And it does sound trite, but it's just been a burning, it's the same phrase. I just want to be of service. I just want to help. I think that's my personality. So if I look back to my old job as a line manager, obviously I was working with people in terms of their own development, career development, and I also wrote training and delivered training and facilitated a few sales conferences, things like that. So I've naturally got, that's the bit that I really loved to do, was when I was working one-to-one with my team and I saw them progress, how they wanted to progress. I loved that training side of it. So I think I've got that in my personality. And now I've just found something that I'm truly passionate about. I truly believe in, and I know how much it can help people. And I just want people to know about it. And I would say I haven't got it in my head how, but the stigma of mental health and helping people feel more comfortable. So within the community, just trying to help people talk about mental health more, I would say would be something how I do that, if I'm honest, I haven't quite figured that one out. So
but it'll come, don't you think? A bit like you right at the beginning of just sitting and not analysing it. it will start to emerge. And I think, my language is the universe. If you put it out there, all the opportunities will come. And then if you recognize them, you can then take that journey or adapt what you're doing, and maybe use your experience in the financial sector. Actually, I can use the 20 years I've had and this wonderful new skill and serve, and then combine the two. To help the people that you speak that language, and they'll recognize you for who you are, plus the gift that you bring into their workplace.
So I think that's the future. I'll have more time. The children won't be interested in me.
It doesn't make a difference. Yes, factoring the kids' ages in always makes a massive difference. Doesn't it?
So I'll have more time to focus on actually doing something for me that will mean. I kind of said by the time I kind of retire, or not retire, but get to the end of my life, I would like to feel like I've done something that's given back. And working in pensions and investments, although they are important, I never quite felt that I was doing something.
It's not soul work, is it? No. My final question, Amy, and again, it's a bit of an interview question, but what would be the biggest lesson do you think you've learned in the journey of doing hypnotherapy and your health and your mental well-being?
I would say that for me, it's that self-belief, and having that confidence in what I can do and what I can offer. As I said earlier, I think there's a lot of us out there that do want to do the same thing, which is help people, and we all might do it slightly differently, but it doesn't mean that anyone's better than me or I'm better than anybody else. I've just got my own way, and I think it's keeping that in my mind. Does that make sense? It's about believing in my own ability to do what I do, because I'm not bad at it. I'm good at it.
You know your subject, that's for sure. So and I am passionate about it, and when I meet the right people, the clients will come to me. The right clients will come to me, and it's having that faith that actually it will happen. When it's right, it will happen. It took, like I said, we moved down to Devon 2018. I really took a year off, and just working with online clients that were coming to me sort of organically, if we want to use that kind of word. So I really wasn't promoting myself or doing anything down here. I've started to do a little bit more about promotion down here, but it's about, again, remembering that even in Bristol, it took time to build up the client base, because I think what we do is a lot about word of mouth and referrals. I think all you can, when I try and, my history is quite different. It's retail and it's manufacture and it's selling things. And again, although I love that, I always felt it was about, I need to sell this in order to make money. And what I love about now is I just want to help, and I happen to get paid for it. And I think energetically, if you just go forward, I'm just going to keep serving, I'm just going to keep helping, rather than having to push, going, I need to do this to get a return. You just give. And again, energetically, I think it creates this gentle wave that it does come back. And it's all about the intention and what you do. And again, trusting that if I'm being the best version of myself, offering the best skill set and helping with heart, it can only come back in spades.
And I think the other part I would say is, and this goes back to something I said to my hypnotherapist quite a few years ago, was he kind of asked me what I wanted, and I kind of said, I just want to get to the 60. This was why it's a few years ago, the age of 60 or whatever, and know that I have enjoyed my life. I've lived my life. I've not been worrying about what I haven't got or what I want or the future. I actually know that I've lived in that moment, and I've done everything I wanted to do, rather than worrying about what I haven't done yet. Because I think very much before, that's the way my mind worked. I was always working in the what ifs, or what do I want, and the future worries. And now I'm very much more about actually, if I want to do it now, even if I look like silly, if I want to dance, I'll dance. I don't care what I look like in public. I can't dance. I know I can't, but I will still do it because it makes me happy.
Yeah.
And it's not, who needs to worry about what other people, if they want to think, oh my God, she looks like she looks balmy, then that's fine. But at the end of the day, if it makes me happy. So it's giving these things a go and actually not letting that fear or that worry stop me from doing it. And that's a big thing that I try and teach my kids is, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And you ask them and they're like, yeah, we've heard it before. And I'm like, no, you're
gonna hear it again.
So yeah,
if you're constantly projecting into the future, you can